Welcome to the Spiral Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lachelle Weemy, a peak performance coach and business strategist dedicated to helping you see what's possible within you, the blind spots that are holding you back, and the solutions to ensure success and fulfillment without the hustle. I use my secret sauce of metaphysics, brain science, and scripture to work with God to manifest your ideal life and business. If you're ready to create massive forward momentum in your business and bust through the blocks that drag you down, join me on the Spiral Up journey and create the clarity, confidence, and consistency to become the CEO that lives your life by design. It's time to create the sustainable impact, income, and time freedom you desire faster. Now is the time to spiral up. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Spiral Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lachelle Weemy, and it is my privilege to welcome you guys to another episode of the Spiral Up podcast and introduce you to a brand new friend of mine, Kimberly Wilkerson. You guys, she is an incredible woman with a really big mission to make the world better. And not only is Kimberly the founder and the owner of Token Clothing Company, she's also has this really cool background as a speech pathologist. And so she has this really cool science brain, but has this giant heart for making the world a better place. And we're going to get into some of that in a little bit. But the reason that I had you on here, Kimberly, is because I've chosen to partner with you on a very special project that I have because I loved your mission. And just like me, you get the fact that, we're taught to know the power of our words. Yes, we're taught that words have a lot of influence over our day-to-day and our future. And but we really both really appreciate the science behind why that's important, because I think that sometimes when we can understand some of that basic stuff, that we can really appreciate the things that we're being taught. So I want to stop chatting and I want to give you a chance, Kimberly, to let our audience in on a little bit more about who you are, what you do. Let us kind of be introduced to you a little bit better.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's great to be here and certainly to be participatory with you and your audience. So I'm excited to be able to share a little bit about language and how I'm taking language and doing something slightly different with it than the average speech therapist does. So I'll actually take you back about 20 years ago to when I was in graduate school for speech language pathology. And in the margins of the notes in grad school, I would doodle dress designs. And I was never a great artist, so they didn't look spectacular. But I knew back then, as I sat in class, spending a lot of time and investing a lot of money into this program, that I still wanted a fashion company one day. But I also wanted to be a speech pathologist. And I knew that I did not know how those two would merge until it finally happened. So I spent years, of course, loving my career as a speech pathologist and learning a lot about the science behind language and communication, certainly communication disorders, but also neuroscience and positive psychology, because they are also sciences that play a part in communication.
Yes.
And then on the side, I would learn a little bit more about drawing and texture and color and all of those pieces of the fashion industry, never knowing exactly when or how this was going to unfold until it finally did. And so back in 2022, when we launched, it was interesting that previous to that, as we were prototyping and thinking about what we'd bring to market, we happened to be, of course, in the golden age of pajamas because of COVID.
Yes.
And so as I started thinking about what I wanted to bring forward with our first product, I determined pajamas, not necessarily because of COVID. It just happened to work really well with that. But because I knew I was going to, at that point, merge language, powerful language, with fabric to create a product that I didn't see on the market, I determined that one of the most intimate ways that we could do that, where people would be reflective and thoughtful, would be through a pajama line. Because when we put on pajamas, usually in the evening, right, our brains and our minds quiet down and we are thinking more about ourselves, perhaps reflecting upon our day, but we don't have all of the busyness that we might have in a day. And so that's why we did some market research on the top 3 affirmations that women wanted the most. And by the way, those affirmations are: in 3rd place, I am beautiful; in 2nd place, I am worthy; and number 1, not surprisingly, is I am loved. And so we took that research and we put those affirmations actually on the interior side of the pajamas. because I wanted that those words touching the skin for, again, scientific reasons, as well as just being able to have that intimate experience. The great thing about those pajamas, though, is that the tops are reversible. And so it's designed where if you're looking in the mirror, you can read that language that is physiologically influencing and impacting your brain. But if you were wearing those pajamas, Lachelle, and I were looking at you, I would be able to read that language as well and have similar impact to my mind and mindset. And so that is how Token Clothing Company was born. And I honestly didn't know I would be merging language with fashion until I knew it was the right timing to move forward. And looking at my notes of those 20 years, perhaps because I wasn't a great artist, I would write a lot about my designs. And a lot of the words, I would end up doodling positive words. And so I realized, how do we take a platform of wearing clothing, which we have to do every single day, and actually use that to our advantage to be able to edify and elevate our mindset? What I call intelligent fashion, right? How, when we think about intelligence, certainly if we look in the Webster's dictionary, we're going to find learning and knowledge. And that is what I want people to do. In scripture, we see that intelligence is light and truth. And when you are saying those affirmations to yourself, I am beautiful, I am worthy, I am loved, you're declaring truth. Those statements are true. And so really it immerses all of those pieces.
Well, and I know that from brain science perspective, the more we repeat a statement, the more emotion, positive emotion that we have attached to that emotion, the more likelihood of that brain pathway to be formed, that neuroplasticity happens, and we start to accept that as truth. And so the fact that somebody has their guard down at night, they have their comfy jammies on, they're ready to be vulnerable and to be free and to be authentic and allow themselves to be able to have that emotion of calmness and peace and tranquility, and then see those words every single evening is going to add that repetition. It's going to add that positive emotion, and it's going to allow for that neuroplasticity, those brain cells to form those pathways. They're going to allow for women to start believing those words. That's my perspective on brain science. I would love to know kind of what am I missing? What else do you have to add to that?
Yeah, well, so first of all, you're absolutely right. It is about that repetition and the accompanying emotion, right? Now, this is really interesting. When I first learned this fact through some research that I was looking at, I was stunned actually. If I were to put in front of you and your audience one single 2-letter word repeated multiple times, and I flash it before you, within milliseconds, heart rates would go up, blood pressure would go up. That word is no, right? That's a word we sometimes really need to use in our language.
Yes.
It's not that that's a bad word.
Yeah.
It certainly is more of a negative word, but that's what happens with words. That would happen just like that with your brain. So when we're looking at the negative, when we're thinking about what we do in way of what we're watching, what we're listening to, how we're engaging with other people, certainly we know that with negative interactions, negative language, we get into that, fight or flight mode, right? Our brain naturally goes to that point.
Yes.
Over time, physiologically, we start to see changes, not just in our brain, but certainly within body systems.
Yes.
Now, thinking about that, we know that, again, the opposite is true. And what happens typically with research as we look at words is that our brain calms down. It is more optimally focused and able to do what we want it to do.
Yes.
And so we're in a place where we can then make decisions at a higher potential than if we're surrounding ourselves with negativity.
Yes.
So just like you mentioned, feeding our minds with positive affirmations, starting to believe those affirmations then certainly leads to behaviors and actions that influence our outcomes, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we think, well, this is too simple, or, how can this really get to here? But again, there are steps along the way, and we have that science to support those steps. So I always encourage people, certainly, start taking a step today. We don't have to wait and you don't have to understand everything, but start taking small steps now.
Yeah. So what kind of steps would you recommend people be aware of?
Yeah, well, you actually just said it, awareness, right? Right. We have to be, that's one step. We have to be aware of our language. Most of us are on autopilot, default, understandable,
Yes.
but we don't realize how much negativity sometimes comes between this
Mhm.
space right here. In fact, there's research to show, and this is really interesting, and I actually hope it's wrong, but but nonetheless, it's documented and published
Yeah.
that over 80% of our thoughts are what would be considered negative, and
Yes.
that we repeat those thoughts almost 90% day after
Yes.
day.
I've read the
I'm
same
like,
data. Yes.
yes. And I'm like, oh, can this please be wrong?
Yeah.
But anyway, it can be if we make decisions. So we
Yes.
have to become aware of what that language is. And I suggest to people, because I've done this myself, is that you take out scratch paper, a journal, whatever it is, over the course of 24 to 48 hours, as much as you can, write every thought that comes to your mind that's about yourself. Maybe not, oh, I need to make, chicken parmesan for supper, but first or second person statements that come to your mind. So, hey, I'm fantastic. Write it down. It's positive. Write it down. I'm ugly. Negative. Write it down. You're going to be writing down everything that is talking about you directly.
Mhm.
That helps you become aware. Then the second step to this is going through being able to find those positive statements, because you want to keep those, right? Give yourself a high five or pat on the back when you see those statements.
Yeah.
With the negative statements, you're not going to judge yourself, but
Mhm.
you're going to cross them out and reframe those statements. I actually call it refashion, right? Because to me, it's more
I
fun.
love
So
it.
you're going to
Yeah.
refashion that statement into something that's positive. So if you told yourself and you had written it down, I'm ugly, I would be crossing that off. And next to it, I'm going to put, I am beautiful and glorious. And if you want to elaborate on that, fantastic. Make that a thought, 2 or 3 sentences. So you're going to do that with every single negative thought. And then I've done this before. You're going to take those new positive thoughts, put them on a new list, and you can do multiple things. You can have that list up on your mirror. I've actually recorded my voice on an app saying those new statements back to back, and then I add music to it because, again, of the emotion, and I will listen to it on a daily basis. So
Yes.
it's that repetition, it's that emotion with the new thoughts. And
Yes.
oftentimes, too, as I'm listening, because I'll listen as I'm getting ready in the morning, right, doing something else, I can then visualize what that looks like. So if I have this powerful statement about who I am as a leader in my company, I'm envisioning myself on stages. I'm envisioning myself being able to give products to people whose lives are being changed by those products.
Yes.
So again, another piece of neuroscience with that visualization. But that, it sounds like a lot, but as you start to do it, it actually is a simple task, and it's something that is just not done one time and done, because we have new experiences, new relationships, new circumstances, and we have to continually be becoming aware of our thoughts and adjusting those thoughts to meet the demands that we have.
Yes.
So,
100%. I mean, I actually wrote about that in my book, and I called it, being curious, just like you were saying. And I kind of put it back into context of, me growing up in the 80s and 90s and watching Scooby-Doo,
mhm.
right? And,
Yep.
they'd always catch the bad guy. The bad guy would always be like, I could have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you pesky kids, right? And so, like, having
Wow.
fun with it instead of being like, gosh darn it, I did it again. I called myself stupid again. Instead, be like, oh my gosh, look at, I caught one. Awesome. And just enjoying
Yeah.
the fact that you're catching things and being playful with yourself and being curious with yourself, because those negative thoughts, even when you judge your negative thoughts, will drop you
Hmm.
down to the bottom of that emotional vibrational scale. And friends, that is going to keep you from being able to manifest a better life for so many reasons. One, it's going to impact your identity of who you are, just like you were saying, Kimberly, that if you believe that you are worthy and that you are loved and that you are a powerhouse CEO and that you believe that all of these things, you're going to start showing up and behaving as if. The identity of who we think we are is the most powerful way in which to have sustainable long-term change. And so the more that you can allow yourself to be inundated with these new thoughts, to catch those pesky little suckers, when they come up, reframe them just like you were saying, and then allow that repetition and that emotion to create a new identity, you're going to start to show up in the manner in which you are wanting to be, and therefore action after action after action are going to compound until all of a sudden you're going to look around and like, holy crap, I'm on this stage. I am this powerhouse CEO. And it's so interesting because the more that we, tell ourselves that we suck, the more that we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, the more that we tell ourselves we don't belong here, the more that we believe that identity, the more it drops us in the bottom of that emotional scale, the harder it is for us to get up to where we're supposed to be. And the power of words, you guys, is so unbelievably fascinating. And it's not just, I kind of joke around too, I'm aging myself, right? But I remember watching the Saturday Night Live when I was a kid. And do you remember Stuart Smalley?
Yes, I do.
And I think about some people
Yeah.
think about that kind of stuff when we talk about affirmations, like I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gall darn it, people like me. But it is so much more than that. And the more that we study the brain, the more that we realize the power of that law of assumption and believing who we are, the more that we allow that identity to become ingrained in who we want to be and allow it to trickle down and reverse engineer our actions, the more we actually start to see results. And it's not just a bunch of, funny Saturday Night Live skits. It really is so much to it. And I love the fact that you chose to use the power of words, to use your background in language, to bridge that with your passion for fashion, and allowing people to be able to experience words and the reminder of words in a totally new and unique way.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Again, intelligent fashion, right?
Yeah.
And let me throw, and I know because your audience, because you come to this intersection of spirituality, faith, and science. And so I
Yeah.
know your audience will appreciate this, but I too am a woman of faith. And so I think about what the scriptures tell us about language and words, which there's a lot more in the Bible than we would recognize, and in other scriptures from other religions. And so when I think about in Hebrews that our world was created through words, right?
Yes.
Through
Yes.
faith-filled words. And that when you see my t-shirt, for those of you who are watching, that says I am, this is our t-shirt line, which again is designed so, Lachelle, you can read these statements, but when I look in the mirror, even on the computer screen, I can read them. Well,
Yeah.
I am is an incredible creative statement that is one of holiness, as we know from the Old Testament in Exodus, right? It is what Jesus Christ says to the children of Israel, tell them I am that I am. And
Yeah.
so when we look even at the power of words in scriptures, that solidifies the impact and influence that words have on our lives. And because of that, we can use those words to create, to lift, to edify. We can also do the opposite. We can use those words to destroy. And
Yes.
so, as much as we love and believe in God, we have to recognize there's opposition. And so, anytime I think of negative statements or a negative situation, I remind myself, where is this coming from? It's
Yes.
not abstract, right? There is opposition in all things. And so we have to be able to confront that, recognize that first, but
Right.
then recognize that we have agency and choice to counteract that opposition and
Yes.
to do those things which will lift or spiral us closer to God and to
Yes.
who we really are.
Absolutely. You guys, there's so much that you just said, Kimberly, that I can completely resonate. Like, we were supposed to meet for sure. And
Yeah.
one of the things that you mentioned was the fact that, God created the world through his imagination and then through the word, right? Like, he created it through the power of the frequency of his word. And when it comes to all of this, the words that we both hear and speak and have going on in our heads create a feeling. So our thoughts create our feelings, and
Mhm.
our feelings are what create our actions and our results, right? And so if
Yeah.
you are constantly telling yourself how much you suck, how much you don't belong, how much you don't know what you're doing, how much nobody wants what you have, right? You are going to continue to create that reality or essentially destroy what it is that you want. But when you can allow the
Yeah.
words of worthiness and love and power and empowerment, you create the feelings then that create those actions that create those results, right? And
Yeah,
so I think that
absolutely.
it's so important that we acknowledge that. And the other thing that I want to kind of tie in here, because I think that one of the things is really special about you and what you're creating in your company, is the fabric in which you use. So a lot of
Mhm.
people don't realize that everything in our world is made up of energy. Every single thing, including the cell phone that I'm holding right here to the desk that I'm sitting next to, is literally made up of atoms that are constantly in motion, right? And so everything has a frequency. And the words and the thoughts and the feelings that I have that are higher frequency, those love, those worthiness, that I am enough, are vibrating much higher, faster. The ones that say like I am not worthy, I don't belong here, are vibrating much slower, lower frequency. The same goes to the food that we eat. We can eat high frequency foods, low frequency foods. We can have high frequency material and low frequency material around us. And all of those things, even though I didn't even realize it as I said it, when I said I resonate with you, that's just literally our energy exchange that we have. Everything is influenced by our energy, and the things that we have or don't have are also influenced by our energy. So when you can allow yourself to be very mindful of not only the words and the thoughts that you think and the words that you exchange with people, but having a conscious awareness of the way in which you're surrounding yourself with high or low energy, really does give us or takes away our power. And I love the fact that you have created something that has been very consciously aware of the power of the things that we surround ourselves with. So tell us a little bit about the fabric that you use.
Sure. I'll talk first of all about the pajamas, right? So when I was choosing fabric, I wanted fabric that would last. Oftentimes, with some of the blends that we have, 5 or 6 washes and it's looking pretty frumpy, or you don't want to wear it again. So I'm like, okay, I've got to find fabric that truly lasts. And with pajamas, I know that sometimes, especially women, right, we have hormones and we have to deal with them. Sometimes you get a little bit more hot, and sometimes people run cold. And so I purposely chose a mix of fabric that would keep you warm and cool and warm. So the pajamas are made out of modal and French terry cotton. Modal comes from the beech tree. So it is very natural. It is very smooth and soft and breathable. And then, of course, French terry cotton is a certain format of cotton, again, a natural fabric, and weaved in a specific way that can whisk away sweat, because sometimes that happens when we're sleeping as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I purposely chose fabric that I knew would last, that would drape beautifully. Even though they're pajamas, I still want women to feel beautiful in them. So it
Yeah.
drapes beautifully on those sizes. And just like you said, because of the fabric that is being used, there is a higher energy frequency and resonance. And when you combine that again with the powerful words and affirmations and the feelings and beliefs that you bring to that, it really becomes this experience
Yeah.
of edifying your mind and your life.
100%. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your journey, but before I do,
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that I've had a chance to pick your brain as much as I can about the actual, use of the words, the I am, the affirmations, any science, anything that I haven't already mentioned that you wanted to make sure that you talked about before we move on to a different topic here.
I think that we've talked about a lot, and the only thing that I would add is how important it is to be able to look at yourself in the mirror
Mhm.
and be able to say those statements to yourself,
Yes.
even if you don't initially believe them. And trust me, I've been there. And
Yeah.
there are still days, even when I may not feel like, I'm just like, well, I don't feel like this. I don't feel that I am whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Okay, I can admit that. But then I say it anyway because I know it's truth. I know it's, even if there's something that is extending beyond where I'm at right now, I know that I can become that person. And
Yeah.
so just using that language shifts my energy, shifts my focus, and it creates a better day for me. So I just want to recognize that I know that there are days and moments when all of us feel less than, and that's okay. Recognize it, move forward with stating those truths regardless, because that
Yeah.
truth will become reality if you believe in it. So
Yes.
that
Yes.
that
I,
would be
I
the only
want to
thing.
just briefly expand on that real quick because I
Yeah.
want you guys to understand this. Number one is you have really utilized the I am. And I want to just acknowledge this because I believe so much in the power of that my company's name is I am, like
Yeah.
by design. And I want to give you guys a demonstration of this. So if I said, I am loved, or I am loved, or I am loved, there is a difference in the way that I said the last one. Because the am in that embodies who I am at my being, you guys, and I want you to really understand that. The other thing that you said, Kimberly, that I want to highlight is that if you choose to say those affirmations out loud, let's say that you're in the mirror and you read them and you say them and you hear yourself say them, You've now utilized several different parts of your brain. You could see, you've
Mhm.
used your ears because you could hear yourself, you used your voice and your tongue and the windpipe and all the things to try to utilize all of those senses. And so I want you guys to recognize the power of utilizing multiple things in order to get that repetition. And I'm going to even add to smile, because that smile is going to add that positive emotion
Mhm.
into it. And I'm curious, because you mentioned something about sometimes you don't always believe it. And I get that question a lot. So I wanted to ask you, as another expert on this, what do you say to people who are like, how do I make my affirmations big enough that it stretches me, but not too big that I don't believe it?
That's a good question, because I've thought about that for myself as well as with
Yeah.
conversations with others. So we definitely want affirmations that are being stretched. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we want affirmations that are true in the sense when you're looking at those negative thoughts. And one of the things I didn't say previously is that I know for me and others, oftentimes you will see a pattern of
Yeah.
negative thoughts over those 24 to 48 hours, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so combating that pattern, again, I'll just go back to this phrase, right? Well, I'll do a different one. I'm not good enough, because I hear that from women all the time. And I recognize it within myself. Like, I can't
Yeah.
do that. I'm not good enough,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so being able to say, so let's talk about business. Let's say you want that multi-billion dollar business. I am fine, and I will be vulnerable here and tell you that is part of the affirmations I say. That is on a vision board. I talk about Token Clothing Company being a multi-billion dollar company. Now, from where we're at, that is a huge stretch, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I also recognize that some of my other affirmations are supporting that because it's about who I'm becoming.
Right.
Right. So when you're thinking about temporal things, I am the owner. If you want, if someone said, I'm the owner of a $10 million house, okay, great. You can have that as an affirmation. That might be a huge stretch from where you're at.
Mhm.
What are those other affirmations that you're putting into place that are
Mhm.
helping you become a person who can develop business or acquire the financial means to
Right.
receive that? And
Yes.
so there's not, I guess there's not a simple answer, but if you hone in, make sure that at least part of your affirmations are really focused on who you are becoming,
Yes.
and who you want to become, because becoming that person will then lead to some of those other temporal blessings that you might desire.
Absolutely. And I think that a couple of things that you mentioned, I think are worth, expanding upon. If you're saying something and all of the affirmations that you're saying are giving you this like, that doesn't feel right emotion, remember that repetition emotions are what create the brain pathways. So if every single time you're saying them, you're like, that's BS, whatever, you might have
Mhm.
to either support it with other affirmations around it, or perhaps you just choose one that's a little less of a far stretch so that you can at least feel a positive emotion towards it. And what you will find, you guys, is that you will find a way to continue to expand your affirmations. So I can say that when I started this journey several years ago, I started with I am enough, I am worthy, I am whole, right? And I've said them so much that I just began, like, they just became part of who I am. I didn't question it anymore. And then I was able to essentially evolve to a place where I was like, I am a strong, bold, confident powerhouse. I am changing lives. Like, it's a different energy around it. I couldn't get there right away. I had to be able
Right.
to accept myself as who I am first before I could say that I am freaking awesome. And so it's okay for you to recognize those stair steps, but just allow your emotions to be the guide. And if you are like, that's like really making me uncomfortable, then just either build around it with other affirmations to support it, or maybe think of something that's not quite as much of a stretch and watch. If you are consistent with this, you will start to see your brain change and you can start to elevate those. All right.
Yeah. And Lachelle, let me share something else with your
Yeah.
audience. So, because this happened some years ago, I had a meditation challenge that I accepted where for 5 minutes on my meditation mat every day, I was going to say, I love and accept you, Kimberly. I had never said those words to myself, I don't think, before this time.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down, probably it was for the first week of doing this, and I barely could say it. And then I would say, I love and accept you, Kimberly, but you can do better. Like, I would have this excuse to say because I
Yeah.
was self-critical. And I'm like, I mean, it was kind of like, well, no, I don't. I mean, kind of, but you need to do
Yeah.
better, right? It was
Yeah.
crazy what my brain was doing.
Yeah.
And so over time, now I can shout it from the rooftops. I
Yes.
love and
You
accept
actually
you,
believe it,
Kimberly.
don't you? Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And even just now saying that, the feelings are a 180 shift from when I
Yes.
started that. So it's
Yes.
just I guess a testimony that yes, this can change as you put in the practice and just experiment. Just
Yes.
experiment
Yes.
with those words. Hang in there, keep at it, that it will change and you will become
Yes.
that person you're seeking to
Yes.
become.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Okay. So there are going to be people who are listening to you, Kimberly, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to you." Because they listen to me, they know that I have a background in anesthesia, right? And
Yeah.
several years ago, I decided that I was just going to go all in and just really pursue where I felt God was leading me. And sometimes that can be really scary. And so I would love for you to give people who are listening some encouragement, maybe some advice, some things that you learned that you would love to pass on to people who are like, "Hey, there's another part of me that I know needs to be expressed." And I know personally that when I was, in the trenches of my anesthesia career and I was getting the degrees and I was climbing the corporate ladder and I was becoming a professor and all the things, I truly hate to admit it, but I am that I was literally just chasing my own worthiness. And I was allowing that whole experience to try to prove to myself that I was worthy. And the moment that I started to acknowledge that God had something bigger in store for me, and I started to let go of that identity and allowed Him to guide me, my world went from black and white to color. That's how I describe it.
Mhm.
And is it easy every day? Nope. Are there things that are hard? Yep. But gosh dang it, I would not change a dang thing. And so I would love to know, like, what is your experience that you would love to share with people?
Yeah. So part of that experience in answer to your question is recognizing that when you have varying desires along the way that may not match, that may not make sense, take advantage of pursuing those desires no matter what.
Mhm.
Science, speech pathology really had nothing to do with fashion. And again, I didn't know how I was merging it, but I just knew I had that in my heart, right? Then was like, well, yes, I do want to be a clinician and do this, but I still have this desire for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I didn't wear pink as a kid and as a teenager. If you had asked me, like, as a senior in high school, hey, you're gonna, don't you want to have a fashion company? I would have laughed. I've been like, yeah, right. And so just know that it's all right as those shifts come. And I would say recognize that, at least I can experience this, is that on the path that if you are seeking to do God's will, that He's going to bring those opportunities and people to you, even if they might not make sense at the time. But
Yeah.
take advantage of meeting with people, taking the class, pursuing that desire, because you may not know how those things will meet.
Yes.
I would never have guessed, as I said in graduate school, thinking, how am I going to have a fashion company? That my experience as a clinician with communication would lead to a company that is all about promoting communication, just
Yeah.
using the platform of fashion. And
That's so
so I think that that is part of it. Along with that is timing. Remember, again, it's been almost 20 years in the making. And there were times when I'm like, I have no idea why I have this desire. It makes no sense. Doors haven't opened,
yeah.
but it opened when it was supposed to. Part of that is because of COVID, and even before COVID, we now have enough research to support what we've been talking about,
Mhm.
right? 15 years ago, speaking about what we've been talking about was kind of, cloudy and maybe
Yeah.
voodoo-y, whatever term people
Yeah.
wanted to use. And
Yeah.
now we have this solid base of research just be like, no, actually, here's what happens to your brain and the outcomes in your life when you focus on positive words and communication. So the world is now prepared for this. The other piece with that too is because of what's happened with mental health over the last few years, and really more of the exposure and
Yeah.
understanding of that this is really a crisis in our society. Again, I've realized how, with what I'm doing and certainly with what you're doing, there is a place for this to step in and to help and bless people. And one of the things I've noticed is that with timing, and especially with God's timing, is that He doesn't just bless your life. Sometimes we're like, where is the blessing? Where is the answer? Where is the help? He creates situations that will bless you the most, but are also going to bless and help other people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so to trust that, even now I can state that it is still a struggle at times to be like, wait a minute, this was my plan and this is how I think things should work out. And they don't. And I have to keep going back to that trust and recognizing but he's creating a situation that will not just benefit me, but will bless the most amount of people, and to
Yes.
trust that.
Yes.
So those are certainly at least a couple of
Yeah.
ideas for those who are listening, just to keep in mind that I have learned personally.
Yes, and I think that it's important, you guys, to acknowledge those tiny little breadcrumbs that he leaves us, right? That we're not meant to know every single step up to the top of the mountain, because if we knew all of the steps, we'd probably chicken out and tell him, "No way, Jose.
Yeah.
I'm not starting." But what he does is he gives us these tiny little lights in the toes of our shoes, and he allows us to take one step in faith and obedience at a time. And then he'll reveal the next one, and he'll reveal the next one. And things that seem completely different from one another start to come together and make sense. And so God can use you. He can use your passions. He can use your strengths. And I want you to remember that all of us, every single one of us, were born with a very unique set of skills, strengths, interests, passions, and experiences, things that we've had to overcome, skills that we've learned, that are going to be perfectly giving you the equipped resources that you need to follow your unique path. And it really comes down to, I say this all the time, it's the desire, decide, do. So you recognize that God plants these desires on your hearts, and sometimes they don't make sense. But you have your eyes open, you keep your, little lights on the toes of your shoes, and you just allow him to lead you one step at a time. And those desires are going to come more and more into focus. And then it's just a matter of deciding. You decide that you're going to just figure it out. Did you know anything about starting a fashion company? No.
Absolutely nothing.
Did you know
Yeah.
anything about all these
Yeah.
different fabric choices and all the
No.
different things and all the things? No, no, but you
No.
knew that this is something that you wanted to figure out. And so you got to work, you utilized resources, you met people, you took the one next step in aligned action in order to get to where you are. You decided,
Right.
you didn't allow yourself to say, "Oh, I'm just a speech pathologist. What do I know about fashion?" You're like, "No, I recognize the
Yeah.
desire and I decide to do what it takes to make it happen." And then you followed through. You didn't allow it to just
Yeah.
sit in your journal. You didn't tell your grandkids about it, like, "Oh, I'm back in the day. I wish I would have done this." No, you actually followed through. And so, you guys, I want you to know that you are not alone if you feel like there's something inside of you that's ready to come out. And I talk about this all the time. Remember the parable of the talents. I want all of us to be able to hear someday, "Well done, good and faithful servant," because we did not take the talents, the unique gifts, and the unique experiences and the strengths and the interests that we have and bury them, but rather we allowed for God to use them to expand the kingdom, to invest in the kingdom. And I want all of us to be able to know without a doubt when we take our last breaths that we did everything that we could to be the best that we can be and help the world as much as we can. And I just think, Kimberly, that you are an inspiration to me. I love what you're doing. And I feel like it's just natural that we kind of end our conversation with you telling us about the nonprofit ties that you have to your companies and what the mission is that you have with part of this to help people.
Sure. And thank you for that question. So, one of the things that I always wanted to do with business long ago is make sure that I have a philanthropic arm, right? Because we always want to be serving as much as we can. And
Yeah.
so, we have an initiative called Pay It Forward with Pajamas. And if you go to our website, tokenclothingco.com, and click on that initiative, you will see a group of women from the organization Refuge for Women, which is our nation's largest long-term rehabilitation center for women who have been sex trafficked. And we don't need to hear their specific stories, that those stories are theirs. However, I asked them to write about their hopes and dreams, despite some of the horrific things that they've faced in life. And so you can read each person's hopes and dreams. And then as a customer, you can gift them a pair of pajamas. And at checkout, you'll also have the opportunity to write a personal note of encouragement. Because again, words create and inspire and lift. And so not only will they get those pajamas with powerful affirmations, but they will have a personal note from you if you determine to do that. And so we're working with them right now, again, to bring women who have gone through some of the most difficult
Yeah.
and horrific experiences in life,
Yeah.
to give them encouragement and love through fashion and words.
Oh my goodness. I love that so much. And I'm sure that you guys can just tell by Kimberly's heart that she is a woman who's meant to make a difference. And I am so grateful that you've followed all of the little God nudges and be here and to be creating what you're creating. And I'm so grateful that I have you in my life and that I've been able to partner with you on this really great project coming up. And I'm just really honored that you're here. So thank you, Kimberly, so much for being on the Spiral Up podcast. And you guys, we will make sure that you have all of Kimberly's information in the show notes. So a link to her website, you can follow her on social, you can get a hold of her. We want to make sure that we've gotten rid of any barriers that might be in the way of you two connecting. And I'm so grateful that you're here. So you guys, thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next time. So much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Each honest review helps me spiral up so that I can serve you even better. Whether you're feeling a lack of impact, income, or time freedom, or perhaps you're just ready for massive momentum in your business, let's chat. Apply for a breakthrough call so that you can gain clarity, identify what's holding you back, and make a plan to spiral up. Head on over to im-lifebydesign.com/breakthrough or access the link in the show notes. For immediate support, log into our community, the Better Club. We focus on inspiration, tactical guidance, and support. This is a community that wants to be better, do better, and have better in life and in business, and we're going to help you do the same. Let's spiral up, friends.